are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Hello and welcome to Law Talk on Germantown Municipal Television. My name is Vince Perryman. I'm a local attorney with the law offices of J. Vincent Perryman. Each month, Law Talk focuses on a wide range of legal topics and issues. On today's show, we'll discuss utilizing technology in law practice. With us now is attorney Brian Schuette with the Schuette Law Group, and he's also the co-founder of Design Your Worklife. Brian, thanks for being with us.
A pleasure to be here.
So this co-founding of Design Your Work Life, it is a stress reduction technique is the way that I describe it to people. Can you expound on that?
Sure. Stress reduction is certainly what we hope will be one of the results of it. But essentially, Design Your Work Life is a technology coaching organization. And right now we've focused on rolling out the legal edition of this. And we teach people how to develop highly efficient workflows through the smart use of technology.
Okay, and then with that, what does that really mean, or how do you start the process?
You know, as a practical matter, it's for some people, depending on how much you're already utilizing technology, it can be a real paradigm shift. And I guess the easiest way to conceptualize it is to think of it as truly going paperless in your office.
Okay, yeah, and that's always can be a big issue because there are people that are used to coming in an attorney's office and that there's stacks of stuff everywhere. And with this method, it's getting rid of that paper and making it more efficient for not only the attorney, but also for the clients. Absolutely.
And I know that there are varying opinions on it, but it's certainly been my experience that clients are impressed when they come into your office and you've got a clean desk, or into your conference room and it doesn't have other people's files stacked in it. Mm-hmm. And implementing the Design Your Work Life process will help you to achieve that.
Okay, so what are some, so it's technology driven.
Very much so, but it's practical technology driven. And by that I mean you don't have to be a tech person to utilize it. I think one of the most significant things that's happened with technology over the last really 5 to 10 years is that it's become so incredibly user-friendly that you can do some very sophisticated things without being a sophisticated user of the technology. I have an English degree and a law degree, and here I am talking about technology. That doesn't tell you anything about me. It tells you a lot about the technology, though.
Right, and it's one of these things that I think once you get past sort of the initial shock of everything not being tangible, then it becomes a very easy system to use.
That's true. I started practicing almost 28 years ago, and at that time we were still doing research in books. You know, you'd go to the law library. I can remember having to travel from the little town where the law office that I worked with was located about an hour away to a university law library because we just didn't have access to all those resources. Now you can pick it up on your phone, you know, while weaving through commuter traffic.
Yeah, and I remember being one of the last law school classes that when we came in we had to do all our research in the books. And it made it when I would have younger attorneys come in working with me and they would be able to use all the search engine stuff to find it. I still can't do a digital table of contents and find documents that way. I like having the actual physical book to look at.
There's a benefit to the tangible, the tangible nature of a book where you can scan an index or a table of contents. But I think there are probably more offsetting benefits of using the technological approach. And nowadays, I don't know of anybody that does all their research in paper.
Right.
You just absolutely have to be able to do it electronically.
Yeah, so in this system, tell us more about the system that you guys have come up with.
Well, so it came out of a law firm retreat that my firm held. It's been about 2 years ago now. And we took out a day, and there were 9 attorneys in the firm, And we posed this question that for each of us to answer, a really simple one-question survey, which how many days out of 30 do you love practicing law? A little bit tongue-in-cheek, but there was a serious element to the question too. And there were 2 of us out of the 9 whose number was 29, and I was one of those 2. But then we had some in the group that had numbers as low as 15, and I think one had a number even below that, meaning that less than half of the time that they spend practicing law do they really like doing it. And so as the managing partner at that time of the firm, my practice arrangement has since changed, but as a managing partner, I felt like it was my responsibility to drill down into that and try to figure out what is it that's taking away the satisfaction and just the enjoyment of the practice of law that I think everybody that chooses this profession should experience. And one of the factors that we kept coming around to is people just feeling as though they were overwhelmed in their practice, that they were swamped, they were bogged down by details and just could not really get the kind of traction so that they could focus on the things that only lawyers can do. They were doing things that other people should be doing. And so that really began a journey to develop in a more formal way a system and an approach that let technology do the work for us as much as possible.
And I know that this is something just that CPA firms were always ahead of the curve compared to lawyers on, as far as just everything became digital. There was e-filing, all of this sort of stuff with the IRS. And it was interesting as far as seeing, because my interactions with CPA firms, there was a lot less filing systems because everything suddenly became digital and they had less overhead and things of that nature. So in all of that, what, I guess, how long does a rollout of this sort of process take?
A lot of it depends on your starting point. We've interacted with a lot of lawyers trying to implement various aspects of this Design Your Work Life approach. And some of them, especially the younger lawyers, they're farther along technologically, and so the curve of their implementation is a much less steep curve. And so, but if you're starting out where you're a legal pads and pen guy, it will definitely take you a little more time. So I would say as a practical matter, on the short end, maybe about 30 days to implement the system. On the long end, probably 6 months.
And we've got about a minute left, but one of the benefits of this that I've seen, because my dear friend Wes Fowler used something similar to it before he passed, he was able, in a one-man operation, handle a much larger caseload than what an average person that is doing everything via paper was able to do.
Yeah, and that's definitely been our experience. And one of the things that it allows us to do in my firm is it doesn't require the same skill level to provide support to the attorneys, because you've really automated a lot of things that before would require much more attention from the attorney.
And I think one of the things too that's an ancillary benefit, which I'm getting a wrap up here, but is that you're able to collaborate with attorneys that are in remote area, maybe not in your city, because all the information's right there digitally.
Yeah, and that's something I want to talk about in a little more detail in one of the next segments.
All right. When we return, we'll continue our discussion about utilizing technology in law practice. Please stay with us.
We'd do anything for kids. Yet 1 in 6 children in the U.S. struggle with hunger. Help end childhood hunger near you. Learn how at feedingamerica.org.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back. I'm Vince Perryman, and you're watching Law Talk. Joining us on our show is attorney Brian Schuette. We are discussing utilizing technology in law practice. So, Brian, one of the goals in all of this utilizing of technology and everything is through smart use of technology, you can make your work life better. And the methodology that you guys have created, what was the name of that one more time?
We refer to it as the 5 E's. The
5 E's. Okay, but the overlying methodology name was...
it's Design Your Work Life.
Design Your Work Life.
And the idea is implementing more efficient workflows through using technology in a smarter way.
Okay, and so you've got this idea of these 5 E's. What are these 5 E's?
So the 5 E's is a way for us just to explain the concept to people and lay out for them a path to implementation and to continuing to use it. And so the 5 E's begin with envision. And envision is simply the notion of coming to an understanding that you can actually make meaningful changes in the way that you're approaching, in this case, the practice of law. And once you begin to visualize how that can happen, it sort of develops in you the motivation to take the next step. And after you've envisioned it, the next step is to evaluate. You look at the resources that you have on hand, figure out what the gap is between what you have and what you need, and then you move to the third step, which is to equip, which mostly involves the acquisition of the technology that you need, both hardware technology and the software or the applications technology. Once you've got all of that in place and configured, then that's when you execute. That's when you actually start using the system. And then the final step is the step enhance. And that's really just the idea that you should constantly be looking at your systems and trying to figure out how you can improve them and just a continuous quality improvement idea.
Okay, so in all of that implementation, I think in the first segment I had asked the question about how long it takes to implement it. And then I think with this, it's also a question to me of, well, if I've got a practice and I've got X amount of support staff, how do I get them all to buy into the system that we're trying to implement?
So we do a brief overview, about a 1-hour overview of the program, generally speaking, but then we also do workshops. And the best way to get an assistant on board is to bring the assistant with you to the workshop. So there's an attorney component where you can get continuing legal education credit, but then there's also that practical component where you get your assistant trained on it. And between the two of you, in a solo practice situation like yours, the two of you can kind of play off of one another and really sort of challenge each other to really implement this in an effective way.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing on one of the 5 E's. It was, you've got the equip, which is getting the equipment, but it's then the implementation.
Yeah, the execute phase.
And the execute phase.
Right.
So in that, how, I guess my question has always been, if you've got a situation where there's more than just, 2 of you in the practice, how do you get that to go from, well, analog to digital, I guess is the real question.
Right. In our experience, we implemented this with a 9-attorney firm. We had 3 offices in 3 different states and about 5 support staff, and a really good ratio. We didn't require as much support staff, and I think it's in part because of this system. And so we really started kind of creating this centralized node in the middle of the firm where documents and information would be processed, and then it got pushed out to the various offices based on a centralized, in our case, we used a Google Drive. So you've got a centralized cloud sort of database of information, and then we would set up sharing with everyone so that everybody had the same access to all of it.
Okay, yeah, and I guess some of the stuff in my mind too is if, well, I've worked at some firms in which each partner had a different way of storing things on the server. So it was a cluster of information that wasn't the most organized cluster. And depending on who you were working with, you had to understand how they save stuff digitally. And if you've got something like that, how do you go in and start to undo that and fix it to where it's in the clean format that you're describing?
You've really struck at the heart of one of the issues, and I think one of the benefits. It's a challenge in the implementation phase or the execute step, but you come up with some standardized ways of naming files and standardized ways of organizing files. And that's really the biggest adjustment that anybody has to make, is learning to name the files according to this naming regime, so that they automatically sort within the folders that you store them in. And I think it helps your support staff tremendously if there is a single approach to file naming, file storage, and really all of those tasks. And so I think the way you do it is you identify a naming regime and then kind of these are our practices approach, and then just get everybody to adjust to it. It's not a big adjustment, but you just got to get everybody on the same page.
And I guess kind of create the naming workflow, for a lack of a better term on it, as far as when you're processing the document, this is the name structure you use.
Yeah, we call it the intuitive naming regime. So basically, you name every document according to its date, and if it's a document that you're creating, it'd be the date of creation. Or if, let's say, it's historical documents that a client has brought a box of things into you, and you convert those into digital format by having them all scanned. And then when you save the files, you name them according to the date that belongs to that document. And so we use a 4-digit year followed by a dash with a 2-digit month followed by a dash with a 2-digit day, and then a space, and then one word that describes the client, so Smith, and then a very brief description after that. And what happens, and you've seen this in the cases that we've worked on together, what happens is it automatically sorts within the cloud drive, and it's incredibly easy to find stuff. We don't spend time digging through files or scrolling through an online drive even, because we know we don't have to know where something is to find it. We have to know what it is. So we know if it's a letter in the Jones case, it's going to be in the letter folder in the Jones case, and then we just look for it according to its date.
Okay. When we return from our break, we will talk more with Brian Schuette about utilizing technology in law practice.
Oh, emojis! I thought the conversation just got dumber.
Ugh, internet trolls, just ignore them.
I like you just the way you are.
I believe in you!
She's a hugger. Give her a squeeze.
Help up the hand.
Ah, there you go.
Thanks, mate.
You're killing it, Jane!
Well, Thomas, you've got pre-diabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have pre-diabetes. Big time.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back. With us now is attorney Brian Schuette, and we were talking about utilizing technology in law practice. Brian, before the break, we went into some of the aspects of the design your work life process. What are the practical applications of it?
So in the broadest sense, the practical application is being able to achieve a truly paperless law office environment. And you've been to my office before, and I can tell you what my office looks like today compared to 10 years ago is pretty dramatic, because I don't have any paper in my office. And I would say that I'm probably more organized than I've ever been because this system kind of requires you to do that. Just so to get kind of practical about what we're really describing here, the idea is to move away from paper files and you know, the great paper chase and always having to manage reams of paper, and to digitize everything. So that means either receiving it originally in a digital format, or if you receive it in a paper format, then you run it through a scanner and turn it into a PDF, and then you save it into your cloud drive. And we use the Google Drive at our office. I have used Dropbox in the past, and I've also used Box, which is a pretty good application. Google Drive works best for us, and the beauty of it is that there's a free version until you get up to about 15 gigabytes. You've got a pretty, it's free at that point, and that's not enough for most practices, but it's a good way to get started. And so you create this Google Drive, and within the Google Drive you create subfolders, and those folders, for depending on what your approach is, you can isolate cases according to the practice area. So if you do adoption work, you'd have an adoption ones, or domestic work generally, or personal injury, or corporations. And that's the actual system that I use, is to organize it by practice area. And then within the practice area folders, we create a subfolder for each client. And we begin it with the initials of the responsible attorney. So mine would be BLS and then the client name. And then even within that, we emulate the old binder text system. I don't know if you remember that, but that was a paper filing system that was really organized. It took a lot of work to keep it up to date, but if you did that, your files were really well organized. You had a lot of access to it. But we emulate that electronically so that there are 10 standard folders that we use, and then we've trained our staff to know to put each type of file in the folder that its type corresponds with. And once that's done, the person who's responsible for processing the documents each day sends an email out to all of us in the office, and we can see on our log there what has come in that day. And so the beauty of it is we've never touched a piece of paper. I don't have to go through the mail. I don't have to go dig up a file. Everything is right there in front of me electronically. And then kind of the next major step with that is once it's all processed on that end, then on the user end, we use the iPad Pro in our office, and we're able to access all the documents here and pretty much do anything that you can do with a document. You can do it on the iPad Pro, which gives us ultimate portability. And so when I have a court hearing, the only documents that I'll take with me are documents that I intend to file with the court as an exhibit, which, you know, sometimes that's a few, sometimes it's not many, but I've done many hearings, and I've even done appellate arguments with nothing but my iPad in front of me.
And it also gives you the opportunity that if it's a trial where you may need to print out something to hand up or impeach, you can have a wireless portable printer with you.
Yes. And I've seen law firms that will set up in the courtroom that way, and that's become easier than ever to do. But there are some really practical things about it. I'll give this example. I was in a case a few weeks ago, and the lawyer on the other side was misrepresenting, I thought, the orders that had been entered in a different court, but that had an effect on this proceeding. And that was an unanticipated issue. But while this lawyer was making the argument that I thought was misleading, I was able to access that document in the courtroom using my iPad. And then once it was my time to speak again, I told the judge that that wasn't the ruling of the court. And the judge said, well, let me see. The judge said, well, so I started to walk up there with my iPad. He said, I don't want an iPad, I want paper. I said, I don't have paper. So I gave him the iPad. He read that. He asked me to hand the iPad to the other attorney that was making this argument, and made him read into the record the portion of that order that he had mischaracterized. And it was really sort of a drop the mic moment in the courtroom. And the only way I could have done that in a paper system is to have had portions of the file with me that day that I wouldn't have known to keep with me. So.
Well, and I think from a client perspective too, what that allows is you can kind of have one attorney handling a trial as opposed to an attorney in a second chair sitting there pulling these documents and handing them.
That's right.
Which is a cost savings.
It is a cost savings, and it just makes you more efficient. You know, anytime you've got better access to your documents and your information, I think you'll do a better job. And it's a rather simplistic idea, but there's a correlation between proficiency and professional satisfaction, meaning the better you are at what you do, the happier you're going to be doing it. And that's been my experience with Design Your Work Life.
Well, and I think some of the things this also gives you is, as I remember, you know, there was a big industry, I think the big party down here was the data company, where they would come in and they would do all these demonstratives and all this sort of tech work for you in a trial. Whereas if you have this system in place, you're a few clicks from being able to do that technology if you've trained yourself appropriately.
That's right.
And then I think the other thing with it is in this system, it makes it very easy to find everything related to the case in case there's any discord that comes up with that client or with the handling of that case on down the line.
It is. It's very easy to share information. And in fact, in my engagement letter, I state in the letter that we don't maintain paper files. And if the client gives us paper, if they want it back, they need to tell us when they give it to us, because otherwise we'll scan it and shred it. And I've not had any clients that have had any problem with that. I think people are growing accustomed to the paperless environment. One item I want to make sure that we get to, because you asked me this before one of the breaks, is how does this help collaboration? So I would say probably greater than 50% of my practice is referrals from other lawyers. You know, you kind of become known for doing a particular area of the law, and lawyers that don't practice in that area always want somebody to send it to. Or sometimes lawyers will just want you to come in and help them with a case. Well, what this system does is it allows us to centralize the file so that even lawyers in different states, and I have a couple of those situations right now, can easily collaborate. When they make create a document and put it into their Google Drive, you've linked it with yours and you have it pretty much in real time. And it makes it possible to do things that really weren't practical 10 or 15 years ago.
And a note on the collaboration before we wrap up here. You know, the other day I came in, I had taken care of a filing on a case that you and I are working here. I got to my house, I put it in the scanner feeder, from my phone scanned it in, and then saved it to the Google Drive and renamed it, and then sent a text, and you had access to it.
And I downloaded it a few minutes later.
So our time is up for this edition of Law Talk. I'd like to thank our guest for taking time out of his busy schedule and being with us and sharing his thoughts and insights. If you would like more information about Law Talk or any other program on Germantown Municipal Television, please refer to our website at www.gmtvonline.org. Thank you for joining us today, and be sure to join us next month for more legal topics. Until then, I'm Vince Perryman, and thank you for watching.